Welcome, Bruchim Aba'im. I'm Rabbi Paul, your virtual rabbi, and you have found Beit Virtuali. Now, this is the second video in the series of the PaRaDiSe of Jewish practice, focusing on each of the different elements of kind of everyday Jewish practice that we can look at through a lens of multiplicity, multiple possible interpretations. When we reject our Jewish tradition, so often this rejection comes from rejecting a straw man of our tradition, as opposed to rejecting a dialogue and discussion with thousands of years of possibilities. Now, first of all, I wanted to thank everyone for your comments on the last video. They're incredibly helpful. They're incredibly uplifting. Every YouTube provider that you follow and like and subscribe to is a human being, and making content is its own thing. And getting feedback really does make a difference. But one of the Beit Virtuali member feedback was that please make sure that you include the proper brachot, the proper blessings for each of these different things that you engage in this PaRaDiSe series. And well, as I started putting today's video together, I realized that blessings themselves deserve their own video, because the entree into fulfilling a mitzvah, the words that we utter as we bless something, they themselves are worthy of multiple considerations. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this, I fought for years against what I call the Santa Claus God. The idea that we have Santa Claus, or someone who's checking to see if we're naughty or nice in heaven, looking over our shoulders, and kind of a twisted sort of voyeuristic sort of idea of deity, but yet something that really is pounded into our heads in childhood. And Judaism hasn't looked at God like that in quite some time, and I'll argue really from the very beginning. And so when we engage in a blessing, some people that I've talked to have said, I don't want to go to synagogue, I don't want to go to shul, it's silly, it's antiquated, it's tying into visions of deity and reality that no longer are sensible to a modern human being. I think that when people hear Baruch Atah, what they're actually hearing is the brilliant mockery of prayer from Monty Python's The Meaning of Life.
Oh, Lord. Oh, you are so big.
And if we reject our tradition because that's what we believe Jewish prayer and blessing is about, then there's a lot more detail we can go into. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to walk through, again, 4 levels of interpretation. If you haven't seen my first video, I deal with PaRaDiSe in a slightly non-traditional way, so link down below. I'm also going to be using words like Hashem, and if you haven't seen my previous videos where how can a non-Orthodox rabbi or non-Orthodox Jew possibly use these words for deity, videos also down below. I've already talked about this, but really quickly so you understand what I'm doing. When I am offering a blessing myself, so if you watch our podcast, Day Drinking with the Rabbi, there's always a blessing for whatever drink we're day drinking at that point. And so we give a bracha, we offer a blessing. Now, if I'm going to tell you what the blessing is, but I'm not actually offering it, then I'm not going to use the words of the blessing. I'm going to fill out the name of God that we utter, not the actual name of God, but the placeholder that we have, with another placeholder to let you know, and more importantly, let me know that I'm not actually saying the blessing. Why? Because, well, as we get to the end of this video, hopefully we'll realize that saying a blessing is more than just, oh God, you are so large. And so when I'm teaching a blessing, I will say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Instead of, if I'm actually saying a blessing, then I will actually use the words that I'm going to be teaching in this video. All right, hopefully that's not too confusing. Like I said, down below is the link for when I talk about various ways that we can use the name of God. So here are the 4 modalities, the 4 levels, the 4 aspects of blessings we're going to look at. Pretty similar with how I'm going to deal with the rest of the various observances that we look at in this series. But the first level is going to be, what does it say? What is the thing in and of itself? What is the basic translation of a blessing? How do we use it? How do we generally understand it? The second level is going to be, what deeper reality does that hint at or point to? One of the problems is we translate our Hebrew into English, and there's no such thing as translation. There's only interpretation. You can't translate. The thoughts, the words come from a different thought tradition, so we can approximate, and that approximation tends to be based on our own prejudices. So what are the other possibilities that are hinted at? The third level is going to be, how can we practically use that in our daily lives, in our understanding? How is this practical today, even in the late modern? And then finally, is there something mystical to step into? Is there a deeper truth or a deeper reality that a blessing can help us find our ways into? All right, so here we go with the pshat, with the first level, with the simple and clear meaning, and that is the words, the blessing itself. Now, there's a formula, and again, people react negatively to the formula, but there is a formula, and the formula is worth learning. One of the things that we talked about on the previous podcast, I guess link also down below, is how hard it is for some people to learn Hebrew, especially those that started later in life. And listen, I started learning Hebrew in my 20s, and the very first thing that I learned was the blessing for studying Torah. And it was not pretty. And I wish that I had a camera going back all those years ago to try to help everyone see that I struggled as well. If you don't learn this as a young child, it is incredibly difficult. And so it sounds like I know what I'm doing now, but that is lots of practice. So for the people for whom a foreign language is the hardest thing in the world, and I know for some people it's really difficult, what I say is start with the formulation of the blessing as slowly as possible every day, repeating it until it becomes easier and easier and faster and faster. And those words, so I'll say the words now because I'm not actually saying a full blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam is our first formula. And then at the end of that, we fill in the blanks of what we're blessing. So if it is Sabbath and we have challah in front of us, then we're going to append to that hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings forth bread from the earth. Or any of the other foods that we're blessing, or if we see a rainbow, there's another formulation. If we see a Torah scholar, if we see something disturbing, if God forbid someone has died, there are formulas to this blessing that we fill in. But how much does it help if you are able to quickly utter the first 6 words? All right, and then if we're fulfilling a mitzvah, then there are several more words that we append after that. And here's where it starts, brains start turning off if you don't like the Hebrew. Asher kadeshan b'mitzvot tzivanu. So we're going to go word by word, and we're going to break down what it means before we get to level 2, and that's the potentiality of these words. But first of all, it's complicated because Baruch, blessed are, or blessing. All right. Right now, pause the recording and write down what your definition of a blessing is. All right, this is one of those things. Have you done it? Pause. Okay. You're back with me now? This is one of those things we tend to define with the word itself. Well, blessing means to praise. Yeah, okay, great. What's praise? Well, it means to bless. All right, well, what does that mean? Well, oh God, you are so large, right? We jump right back into Monty Python really quickly. What is the underlying meaning? Sanctified. Well, yeah, that's all tied into the same sort of thing. And we're also using English words that aren't really Hebrew words at this point. So let me give you one of the quickest and easiest ways to understand this. A blessing, or to bless someone, is to lift up instead of tear down, right? If you remember Beit Virtuali, or if you watched a few of the videos, this is how I end every single video. Let's lift up instead of tear down. Why is this important? Because we use excuses all the time when we tear down, and we say we're actually lifting up. That awful, awful, awful quote from Vietnam, we had to destroy the village in order to save it. So, for example, let's say someone comes onto your Facebook page and decides to just, start having at you. Well, that might be quickly and easily justified because, I actually wasn't tearing down because the person needed to be educated in that second. Well, wait a second here. If in the moment that we are saying that thing, regardless of what the underlying idea is, if in the moment that we're saying that thing, if we are having to justify knowing that we are smacking someone on the side of the face, then can we in that moment say what we're actually doing is blessing? That's why blessing is so powerful. Is there a way, if we are upset with someone, if we disagree with someone, is there a way to communicate with them that remains a blessing? That's our challenge in this year. And that's the best way to understand a blessing. In that moment, are we lifting up or tearing down? Tearing down means it's not a blessing. Lifting up means it's a blessing. And even if that's not really defining the word, it's defining the emotions around it. So we start with this phrase, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, starts with that something must be lifted up. That's a good place to start. So ata means you. So who are we addressing? We are saying you are lifted up. And then Adonai, beneath the Adonai, that's a pointer, is the ineffable 4-letter name of God. Okay, so we are saying blessed are you, and then invoking deity. And then we're going to a more general word for God, Elohim, God. Eloheinu, however, means our God. Enu at the end of a word is always going to be our. Okay, that's called a pronomial suffix. You got to love that one. A pronoun at the end of a word. We actually stick words together in biblical Hebrew. It's called an agglutinative language, right? Gluten, stick together. Agglutinative languages like Korean are agglutinative. So agglutinative language, we stick stuff at the beginning, we stick stuff at the end. That's why it's when you enter Hebrew, sometimes hard to understand biblical Hebrew because where's the word and what's stuck on at the beginning and what's stuck on at the end. But Eloheinu, our God, so blessed are you, our Adonai, our God, Eloheinu, Melech, king or sovereign, Ha'olam. Well, this one means more than the universe, which is what we usually say, or of the world. Ha'olam is the olam, and olam is time and space. So it's not just of the universe, or the world, but of all eternity. So it's a little bit bigger than we think. So and then we fill in the words afterwards. And if you really want to practice that every day, let me know. I'll send you an MP3 of me very slowly saying those words so that you can repeat after me. And I'll do it in the accent that you're used to, because I usually say Baruch and swallow the R in some lame attempt to not have an American accent. But the American accent is just fine. We could say Baruch, and the British accent is just fine, and I'm not going to even try to do an approximation thereof because I know that I will get into deep trouble. All right, so those are our 6 words, and what is the surface meaning? Well, it is the formula that we use when we are either blessing an object or an activity or a thought or an experience, or then we continue with a few more words when we are saying, creating the intentionality for performing a mitzvah. So those next words are Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. So again, slow down. Asher, that's just a conjunction, a connecting word, that which, okay? So we start off with Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. If you look at that entire thing as the subject, this is not directly mapping onto grammar, but as the subject, then the predicate, so the subject is this together idea of invoking how we understand deity. What happens because we invoke that deity? Well, that's the next part when we perform a mitzvah. So Asher Kedeshanu, Kodesh Enu, who makes us holy. What does holy mean? Well, holy means something completely different in Hebrew. It means separate and elevated. So not the everyday stuff, but something elevated from everyday. So this eternal that we're evoking does what? Causes us again to elevate. So elevated are you, that which causes us to elevate. There's an awful lot of elevation going on here. All right, Asher Kedeshanu, who elevates us or causes us to be elevated. Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvotav is a preposition at the beginning of the word that means in or through or with. With what? With our sacred obligations, our mitzvot, mitzvotenu, with our mitzvot. So in other words, this thing that we're about to fill should be part of elevating. Why are we doing these things? Not because it's rote, silly tradition that was written thousands of years ago, but because the process of doing should elevate something in a real sense. Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, same root, means mitzvah again, but in this sense to v means and, another word, letter stuck at the beginning of a word. So, and tzivanu orders us, commands us, or the best translation, I think, obliges us. What a great word in the 21st century. To do what? And then you fill in those last words. So we can learn each of those words individually and get really good at saying that. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. And without even doing anything else, stopping this video and waiting 5 weeks to just meditate yourself on each of those words, the individual meaning at this surface level will change our entire prayer life right there. Now here's what's great. You don't have to do it all in Hebrew. Do just the first, learn Baruch atah Adonai, and then fill out the rest, how we understand God, who asks us to do what, or which causes us to do what. We can, let's say that I need to put up a mezuzah, and I don't know that the end of the blessing is likboa mezuzah. So I can say the first part of that blessing, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, to fix a mezuzah. All right, if I don't know the words, then fill it in. It's still making the best blessing we can with what we have. And in the process of allowing ourselves that, look how we've just lifted up ourselves instead of this, oh, you're a bad person, or if I ever hear it again, I'm going to scream, oh, you're a bad Jew. No, we do the best with what we have, but constantly try to lift ourselves up, each other up, and our knowledge up. All right, that's the surface level. Let's go to the next level down, or the next level up, as the case may be. And that is, what are these words hinting at? And I'm just going to go word by word again. We've already kind of done this with Baruch, blessed are, because, yeah, great, we've got this idea, this key. But what this is we use this word Baruch, and now it is the beginning of a pathway into something different. So it's not just a formula to fulfill an obligation. It is also a pathway into deeper thought. Well, pathway into what? The next word, ata, you. I'm going to invoke Martin Buber right now, because Martin Buber's I and Thou, Ich und Du, is one of the great philosophical works of the 20th century that helps us to understand a reality. And that is when we say the word you, we mean it in one of two different ways. If I say you, and I'm looking at you as the person who can do something for me, well, then you're an object. And that is not how we relate with that which is greater than us. That is not elevation. So if I'm saying, blessed are you, when I evoke the word you, I should be reminded that I'm not talking about something outside of me. I'm talking about something inside of me, around me, and with which I'm connected. So if we see Baruch atah, and we're thinking in terms of divinity, all right, I'm evoking something in heaven who can grant my magical wish. That's not a blessing. That is God. That is the universe. That's the eternal. That is the unknowable connective tissue of all that we're using as Dumbledore? Merlin? That's what we do all the times. Okay, I really, really, really need this. So no, if I'm praying for healing, if I make a healing blessing, then I'm not actually evoking a magician in the sky. I'm evoking our collective responsibility. What's our collective responsibility? To be a part of the process of healing. How do we do that? We visit the sick. We let people know that someone's ill and they could use cards and they could... That's what lifting up means. I don't know what happens at a heavenly level. I am just a human being, but I do know that if we use this as a pathway into seeing people as subjects instead of objects, then that you takes on a completely different meaning. So blessed are you, that with which I am interconnected, not that which can do something for me or to me. Okay? Adonai is now the pointer word. Beneath that is Yud-He Vav-He, the ineffable four-letter word of God. Again, go back and watch my videos when I talk about the name of God. But it's not the name of a person. It is a label for all of existence. So, blessed are you. I'm labeling all of existence a you. What I'm doing is I'm labeling a relationship. When I start a blessing at this level, what I'm doing is I'm focusing my thoughts into something where I'm a part of a dialogue, meaning what I'm about to say, I have as much responsibility for as that which I am invoking. This is dialogue, not command. This is dialogue, not ordering. This is together, my responsibility in the universe. Baruch atah Adonai. Okay? Next three words, Eloheinu, our God. Now, wait a second here. That feels again like Santa Claus in the sky. No, it's only because we use the word God and then we think of Santa Claus up in the sky. So what is our God? What is that which rules us? Well, what should rule us is elevating ourselves as being a part of existence. Baruch atah Adonai. So what's our God? Our God should be how we relate with the universe, that we are in a relationship with the universe. It's not Adonai as a name of God, like Bob is a name. We're not saying, blessed are you, Bob, who's our God. We're saying, blessed is this relationship that we have where we are a part of all universal processes. And that, Melech, is the ruler, Ha'olam, of all time and space. That brings us back to this is a universal concept and not an individual limited concept, right? If this is a little too extreme, pause, take the deep breath, even come back to this at a later time. But this is not a simple formula to have a wish granted. This is stepping into a completely different focus with reality. And then we fill in bread, we fill in wine, we fill in vodka, we fill in meeting a Torah scholar, we fill in seeing a rainbow. Why? Because each of these blessings, each of these things that happen to us, the sweetness that we smell, the wonderful things that we taste, are all things that can just be part of the everyday normal existence that we go through, or they can become a moment where we see something deeper and elevated. A blessing is something where we take what we do all the time and we lift it up just a little. That's the second path. Continuing on to the mitzvah part of the second path, Asher Kiddushanu. I've already gone a little bit there. So again, if it's not elevating, if we are just throwing on a tallis, if we're just lighting the candles, then we're not fulfilling the mitzvah. The mitzvah is deeper than just doing the thing. It's doing the thing with intentionality. Why are we doing this? Being aware of what we're doing. So, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav. Well, what is a mitzvah? Again, it's a sacred obligation. Why is it a sacred obligation? Because these are the things that have the potential to lift us up. Being aware of what we do in prayer, through a tallis, through tefillin. Being aware of the moment we enter Shabbat, the time that we need to unplug from all of the junk going on around us. That should be something we enter in consciously And that's something we should elevate as we do. That's why we have this formula, so that we have a pathway into a deeper relationship. And commands us, well, why are we obligated to do something? Well, because if we just have the thing that we all think we want, perfect freedom, then we tend to not live life. We need some level of boundary. That's the beautiful acknowledgement of traditional religion, is boundaries are actually required to progress in life. Believe it or not, perfect freedom and certainly perfect anarchy will not last very long, because until we have some sorts of boundaries, things don't exactly work very well. Deep breath. All right, we've made it through levels 1 or 2. I told you this PaRaDiSe stuff could be fun. Jumping to level 3. This is the allegorical level, which is, again, is how do we bring that into everyday reality? Well, hopefully the first 2 have already helped us with everyday reality. But at the most simple level, a blessing brings us into the present. All right, before you start this video, or even right now, and this is always a fun exercise when you are listening to a rabbi speak, write down what you've been thinking of during this video that has nothing to do with what I've said, right? The typical, did I leave the iron on? What are the things that happened yesterday, day before, last week, last month, 20 years ago, God forbid? What are the things that have come to your mind since we've begun this video, right? Called you out. And what are the things that you need to do in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, tomorrow, next week, next year? What are the things that have been coming into your mind? It's going to happen. That's how the mind works. But if we look at our focus, our moment in time as a percentage, what percentage of us is in this moment? It's always going to be relatively small. And the idea of a blessing is to gather as much of those tendrils, as much of those arms and fingers and lines of energy that are attaching to anything but this moment in time, and saying, I'm going to grab them all. So how does that work? I'm walking along the road and the roses have started to bloom. Not here yet, but the first buds and flowers are starting to appear outside. Baruch Hashem, what a beautiful thing. All right, so I walk down the road and the roses have come out. There's some roses in this yard that smell so wonderful. And I walk by like, hey, cool rose. Guess what? I'm not going to think of it in 5 minutes because I wasn't present in that moment. So I add a blessing to that, a blessing for smelling sweet things. And there are 3 different blessings for smelling amazingly different things, and maybe a future video, if you're interested in that, we can go through it. The most famous one is when we smell spices for Havdalah. But I sit there, I look at the rose, I smell it, I utter the blessing right before I let that scent in, and now all of a sudden I've brought all those things that are attached to yesterday and tomorrow and anxiety and anguish, and I've brought them into that moment. We have this tradition in Judaism that we say 100 blessings a day. And if we interpret that again as Santa Claus in the sky looking over our shoulder, then that looks like a burden. If we look at it as a guideway to continuously throughout the day, 100 moments every day where we become fully in the present. Well, again, what are the things we're supposed to bless? Well, yesterday I got the news that one of the great mentors of Judaism here in Germany passed. And I'll probably start crying as I say this, but Rabbi Henry Brandt was one of the true Gedolim. And as that news came forward, the Rebbetzin and I, we uttered the blessing. And I'll say it again right now as a full blessing, because his memory is fully present in this moment. And that's Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hadayan ha'emet. Blessed are you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, who's the only true judge. Why do we utter that thing? Well, at the surface level, because we're saying we don't understand what happens, why we lose people when we do. But the deeper level right now is, do I want to be mourning someone who's had an impact in my life with 60% of me thinking of the Facebook comment that I got yesterday and another 20% thinking of how I'm going to get back at them? Or do I want my full self in that moment thinking of this amazing human being who influenced me and influenced so many other people? That's what a blessing is. So if we say 100 blessings a day, 100 is a number of the eternal. It is a number of unity, a number of one. This is how we become one. This is how we become a unity again. We utter these words that cause us to become focused on the now, not on the maybe. And finally, we get to the mystical level. I know this is a long video. This is a video where you can stop at any time and then come back and listen to another level of the video when you wish. But this sod, this hidden, this mystical, well, it's going to be a little bit more obscure, but stick with me. We have this idea in Judaism of the shefa. Shefa means influence. And this is a Kabbalistic sort of idea where it's kind of a line of influence, but it's a bi-directional line. Well, what does that mean? It means that the truest version of God that we can conceive of is something that we can't conceive of. We use the label Ein Sof, without quality, without end. So this is the most truth of the universe, and through the Shefa, through manifestations of creation, I know I'm using Kabbalistic language. If you want to hear more about it, become a member of Beit Virtuali, and I'll send you all the videos we did on Kabbalah. But this then, through manifestations such as knowledge and wisdom and beauty, this eventually influences us. But within mystical Judaism, our actions influence the very nature of God. What, does that seem weird? Not at all. Let me show you how this works. So let's say I'm in a religious community, doesn't matter what religion, doesn't matter what community, and every time we evoke God as the God who's going to help us win our war, who's going to help us, if that war is anything from beating the other team in the Super Bowl, or if the God that we're evoking is the one to help our swords become sharp and our guns shoot straight. Well, if this is the only time we evoke deity, then what God are we manifesting in our community? A God of war. We have this title throughout the Torah because there's a lot of war and a lot of killing and a lot of battles in the Torah and in the Tanakh. We refer to this God as Adonai Tzevaot, the eternal who is part of the hosts of the armies of heaven. This God exists. Why? Because throughout human history, we've evoked this God. And if it's the only God that we evoke, then how do we understand deity in our lives? That which helps us win battles. What's missing from that? Peace, interconnectivity. Love your neighbors yourself. That which is reprehensible to you, do not do to another. If, however, we only evoke God when we're talking about peace, shalom, if we only evoke God when we're talking about interconnectivity, Shema Yisrael Adonai Adonai Echad, how we are connected to each other, then all of a sudden God manifests God's self as interconnectivity. We think we don't have power. We have so much power to choose the nature of God around us. If our community is only focused on we're right and they're wrong, guess what? God is appearing in the universe. And you know what? Guess which gods we're evoking right now? We don't always call them gods, but the God of the universe that we're evoking is the one who's right and the other person is wrong. And look how well that's working for us. That's this thing mystical points us to the true reality. And that is we need to be aware of when we say Adonai, what that's pointing to. And that pointer, that Yud He Vav He, that ineffable understanding of togetherness, are we forcing that to be something like a God of war? Or are we allowing that to be a God of interconnectivity? How we evoke God in our blessings. And the God that's evoked as we put on a talus. That talus can be the way that we feel embraced by that which is greater than us, as is suggested in the Talmud, or that can be the girding ourselves for getting ready to vanquish our enemy. We have the power as individuals and as communities to define the nature of God as God manifests around us. And the more of us that choose a certain aspect of God, the more that God is the God that is present on this earth. That's the mystical part of a blessing. And with that, I'm at the end of this video. If you've made it this far, I'm impressed. Every single mitzvah that we're going to be working on in this series, again, has these levels to it. But it also means, since we're going to utter a blessing or a series of blessings for every one of them, it means that every one of these things that we're going to look at has the ability to elevate or not elevate, but ultimately has the ability to determine for us what version of eternity has manifested in our world. It's a big responsibility, which is actually why traditional religion isn't silly at all. If we walk in with awareness and intentionality, it's powerful, it's transformative. Thank you for being a part of Beit Virtuali. Now let's go lift someone up. In the process, we do truly begin to lift everyone up. Take care, we'll see you next time.